Everyone on the street turned their heads when they heard her scream. It wasn't the kind of scream that came from kids playing tag or neighbors arguing about parking. It was sharp. It was scared. It was the sound of my daughter's voice, and it cut through me like a knife. She was standing there just a few steps away from our driveway, held back by two men in cheap security uniforms. Their badges didn't shine under the sun. Their grips on her arms were too tight. And the worst part? People were watching, whispering, but nobody was stepping in. "Why are you holding her?" I demanded, running across the lawn. My daughter's eyes locked onto mine, wide with fear, searching for safety. She was only 17, still young enough to be fragile, but old enough to feel humiliation burning her cheeks as strangers stared. One of the guards tightened his hold and barked. "This area is under the control of the HOA. She violated the rules." The words didn't even make sense. Rules? Control? I'd lived here long enough to know these men weren't part of any real homeowners association. But in that moment, with my daughter trembling, I felt the heat rise in my chest. "Let her go," I said, my voice low, controlled, but my fists were already clenched. The guard smirked, as if he held authority, as if he had power that belonged to him. "Not until she answers some questions. She was trespassing." The neighbors leaned closer. Some pulled out phones, recording. Some shook their heads, already judging. And my daughter, she looked down at the ground, ashamed of something she didn't even do. That's the thing about moments like this. Even innocence feels like guilt when eyes are piercing into you. I stepped forward, but the other guard raised his hand. "Sir, step back. We have the right to detain her." The right, that word hung in the air, heavy and false. They had no right. But still, they spoke with the confidence of men who thought nobody would challenge them. And the people around? They just stood there, silent witnesses to a girl's dignity being stripped away, piece by piece. My daughter's voice cracked when she finally spoke. "Dad, I didn't do anything, I swear." I nodded, steadying myself. "I know, sweetheart, I know." Inside, I was burning. Rage, sorrow, and something else. A reminder that sometimes the people who scream the loudest about rules are the ones who follow none of them. I looked at the guards again, trying to memorize their faces. The way their jaws tightened, the way their eyes darted as if they were already aware this would end badly for them. But not yet. Not now. Because here's the truth I didn't tell anyone in that moment. This neighborhood, these houses, these streets they thought they ruled, they didn't belong to an HOA. They belonged to me. But I didn't say it. Not then. Not with my daughter's wrist still trapped in a stranger's grip. Instead, I asked, calm but sharp, "What exactly do you think she did?" One guard glanced at the other before answering. "Loitering, wandering in restricted zones. We have orders to keep the community safe." Safe, another word twisted into something ugly. What they meant was control. What they wanted was fear. And my daughter, she was their pawn, their chance to flex authority they didn't have. The crowd shuffled. Some neighbors whispered, "Maybe she was somewhere she shouldn't be." Others muttered, "They're just doing their jobs." But isn't that how it always goes? People see injustice, and instead of stopping it, they rationalize it. They build excuses for cruelty because it's easier than confronting it. I saw my daughter's shoulders slump, her lips trembling as if she wanted to defend herself but couldn't find the words. And in that silence, I understood something painful. The hardest part wasn't being restrained. The hardest part was being humiliated in front of people who pretended not to see her humanity. I took a deep breath. I said slowly, "This is your last chance, let her go." The taller guard squared his shoulders. "Or what?" The question lingered like a challenge. My daughter's eyes widened, pleading. She didn't want violence, she just wanted to go home. And though my fists itched for justice, I held back. Because sometimes patience is sharper than anger. Sometimes the quietest man in the room is the one holding the loudest truth. They didn't know who I was. They didn't know what I owned. They didn't know that this entire game they were playing was happening on a board I had built. But soon they would. The silence after his words felt heavier than any chain. Or what? Everyone leaned in. The neighbors, the guards, even my daughter, all waiting to see if I would explode. The taller guard smirked, like he had already won, like he believed the sight of 2 uniforms and a cheap clipboard gave him power over me, over her, over all of this. But I didn't flinch. I just looked at him, steady, quiet. Sometimes silence can be scarier than rage, and the longer I held his gaze, the more his smirk twitched, like he was starting to wonder if he'd pushed too far. My daughter whispered, "Dad, please." Her voice cracked. The sound of it pulled at something deep inside me. She was begging me not to make things worse, not to turn a humiliation into a scene. And I understood, because when you're young, being seen in your most vulnerable moment feels worse than anything else. The shorter guard tightened his grip on her wrist as if doubling down. "We're not letting her go. She broke the rules." Again with the rules, again with the lies. I turned my head slightly, scanning the crowd of neighbors. Some shifted uncomfortably, others stared straight ahead, pretending to be neutral. But I could feel it, that ugly hunger that lives inside communities like this. The hunger for control, for gossip, for stories to pass around at dinner. My daughter was a person to them in that moment. She was drama, entertainment. "Tell me," I said softly, my voice cutting through the tension. "Who gave you these orders?" The taller guard hesitated, just for a second, and that second told me everything I needed to know. These men weren't following anyone's orders. They were making it up, enjoying the illusion of power while it lasted. "Doesn't matter," he finally answered, his tone sharper now. "We enforce the HOA rules, that's all you need to know." I almost laughed, but it wasn't funny, it was pathetic. "Funny," I said, tilting my head, "because there isn't an HOA here." A ripple of whispers broke out among the neighbors. Some frowned, confused. Others looked at the guards, waiting for their reaction. The taller guard's smirk faltered, but only for a moment. "Sir, step back, you're interfering." Interfering? Imagine that. A father trying to protect his daughter accused of interference. I took one step closer, close enough now that I could see the sweat gathering on the edge of his hairline. "If you don't let her go right now, the only thing you'll be enforcing is your own unemployment." The shorter guard scoffed. "Big talk, you think you can." "Try me," I cut him off. My daughter's eyes darted between us, her lips trembling as if she wanted to scream but didn't dare. I could feel her fear pressing against my chest, and for a moment I wished I could shield her from every eye, every whisper, every cruel hand gripping her wrist. The taller guard pulled himself up, trying to reclaim the upper hand. "We don't answer to you." And that's when I felt it, the shift inside me. That calm, cold reminder of the truth I'd been holding back. They thought they were untouchable. They thought this little performance of authority gave them control. But control is an illusion, and in this neighborhood, in these streets, the illusion was mine to shatter. I leaned in close, my voice just loud enough for them and the crowd to hear. "You don't answer to me? Interesting, because last time I checked, every brick you're standing on belongs to me." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Some neighbors blinked in shock, others frowned, whispering faster now. And the guards, for the first time, their grip faltered. My daughter looked up at me, her confusion mixing with relief. She didn't know yet, she'd never needed to, but now the truth was out. The taller guard shook his head quickly, trying to cover his nerves. "That's a lie. No one man owns all this." I straightened, my calm returning like armor. "You sure about that? Because I've got the deeds, every lot, every street, every square foot. You've been playing king on a board that doesn't even belong to you." The whispers turned into murmurs, then into outright chatter. The crowd was buzzing now, shifting like a tide. Some looked at me with new respect, others with envy. But all of them knew one thing: the guards had just been exposed. And still, they didn't let her go. My daughter tugged at her wrist, her voice soft. "Dad." That sound, fragile, broken, pushed me past the edge of patience. I took a deep breath, my voice steady but sharper than ever. "This is the last time I'll say it. Release her, now." For a moment, no one moved. The guards stood frozen, caught between pride and fear. The neighbors held their breath, waiting for the outcome. My daughter's eyes shimmered with unshed tears. And then, finally, the shorter guard loosened his grip. My daughter stumbled back into my arms, clutching me like she had just been pulled out of a storm. The taller guard tried to cover the retreat with bluster. You can't intimidate us. We'll be back, you'll see. But the crowd was no longer on his side. Whispers had turned into questions. Doubt had planted itself in the soil of their little performance, and nothing they said could erase it. I held my daughter close, steadying her trembling hands. I kissed the top of her head, whispering just for her, "You're safe now." But inside, I knew this wasn't over. Because men like them don't just walk away. They don't accept humiliation. They come back louder, angrier, more desperate to prove they're in control. And I also knew something else. Next time they wouldn't just come for her, they'd come for me. And I was ready. Because what they didn't understand, what none of them understood, was that owning property isn't the same as owning power. Power is knowing when to wait, when to strike, when to reveal the truth like a blade sliding from its sheath. And the blade had only just begun to glint in the light. Everyone thought it was over when the guards finally let her go. People drifted back toward their lawns, pretending to care about their gardens, their mail, their cars. But the whispers didn't stop. They never do. That's the thing about neighborhoods like this. Gossip grows faster than weeds. And that day, it was my daughter's name that spread like wildfire. By evening, she wouldn't come out of her room. Her dinner sat untouched. I could hear her crying, muffling the sound with her pillow like she was ashamed to be heard. That broke me. My little girl, who used to run barefoot down these streets, who once believed neighbors meant safety, now she couldn't even step outside without thinking the world was laughing at her. I knocked softly on her door. "Sweetheart, it's me." No answer, just silence. I leaned my forehead against the wood. "You didn't do anything wrong. None of this is your fault." A shaky voice came back, barely above a whisper. "Then why didn't anyone help me?" Her question hit harder than any guard's grip. Why didn't they? All those people standing there watching her struggle, watching her beg with her eyes, and not one of them stepped forward. "Sometimes," I said slowly, searching for words I wasn't sure existed, "people are too afraid to do the right thing. They tell themselves it's not their problem, but that doesn't mean you were wrong. It just means they were weak." The door cracked open just enough for me to see her tear-stained face. She looked smaller somehow, like a piece of her had been stolen out there on the sidewalk. "Dad," she whispered, "what if they come back?" I swallowed hard, because I knew they would. "They won't touch you again," I said, steady. "I promise." But promises are fragile things, and the truth was I didn't just need to protect her body. I needed to protect her heart, because humiliation leaves scars the eye can't see. The next morning, the neighborhood was buzzing. I could feel eyes on me as I walked to the driveway. A couple across the street paused their conversation when I passed. A man watering his lawn turned off the hose, pretending to adjust the nozzle while staring too long. Finally, one neighbor, Mrs., waddled over, her face full of curiosity disguised as concern. "Such a shame about yesterday," she said. "But you know, your daughter shouldn't have been wandering where she doesn't belong." Her words were like poison wrapped in sugar. I could see it in her eyes. She wasn't worried for my daughter. She was thrilled. Thrilled to have something to talk about at her bridge club to turn into whispers behind closed curtains. I forced a smile. She was exactly where she belonged. This whole place belongs to her. Mrs. frowned. "Oh, now don't be dramatic. The guards were only doing their job." I leaned in just slightly, letting my words sharpen. Their job is what I say it is, and yesterday they forgot that. Her smile faltered. She stepped back, suddenly remembering an appointment she didn't have, and just like that, she was gone. But I could feel it, the shift in the neighborhood. Half of them were already taking sides. Some doubted the guards. Others clung to their illusion of authority, too invested in the lie to admit they'd been tricked. And the guards, they weren't done. I knew it in my bones. Men like that don't fade quietly. They regroup. They retaliate. That night, as the sun dipped below the rooftops, I stood at the window, watching the streetlights flicker on. My daughter sat curled on the couch beside me, her head resting against my arm, still fragile but trying to be strong. "Dad," she said softly, "why do they hate us?" I closed my eyes. They don't hate us. They hate what they don't understand, and they hate what they can't control. She tilted her head up at me. "Then why don't you tell them? Tell everyone the truth that you own this place, that they can't touch us." I looked down at her, my heart heavy. Because sometimes the truth doesn't set you free, sometimes it makes you a target. Her brows furrowed, but she didn't press. She just leaned closer, her breath slowing until she fell asleep against me, and I stayed there, unmoving, staring out the window like a sentinel. Because I knew the storm wasn't over. It arrived sooner than I expected. 3 days later, I came home to find a bright orange notice taped to my front door. In bold black letters, "Violation. Immediate action required." My stomach tightened as I ripped it off. The paper listed ridiculous accusations: improper landscaping, unapproved exterior modifications, unauthorized guests. Each line was laughable, except I knew it wasn't a joke. This was their move, their retaliation. I crumpled the paper in my fist, my jaw tightening. My daughter came to the door behind me, her eyes wide. "Dad, what is that?" I forced calm into my voice. "Just noise, nothing more." But inside, I could feel the heat building. They had humiliated my daughter once. Now they were coming after me, trying to chip away at my authority, at my patience. And maybe they thought I'd cave. Maybe they thought I'd beg for forgiveness or bend to their fake rules. They didn't realize they were playing against the man who owned the board. The neighbors watched as I stood there holding the notice, my daughter clutching my arm. I could almost hear their thoughts. Would he fight back? Would he surrender? I looked at the paper one last time before tearing it in half, letting the pieces fall to the ground. My voice carried across the street, low but certain. "This isn't over." And I knew every neighbor, every whisper, every pair of eyes, they all felt the shift. The game was changing. The battle lines were being drawn. But only I knew how far I was willing to go. Because protecting my daughter wasn't just about shielding her from humiliation anymore. It was about teaching everyone, the guards, the neighbors, the entire community, exactly who held the power here. And soon they'd learn. The next morning there were 2 more orange notices, one on the mailbox, one slapped onto the hood of my truck, both stamped with the same word in capital letters: violation. Neighbors slowed their walks to glance at them, pretending not to. A jogger paused to tie his shoe in front of my driveway, lingering just long enough to snap a photo. The whispers hadn't faded. They had. And my daughter, she stood at the window, arms crossed over her chest, watching with eyes that no longer held the same innocence. "They're not going to stop, are they?" Her voice was flat now, stripped of the panic from before, but somehow that was worse. Fear fades, numbness, that's harder to fight. I walked over, gently pulling the notice off the truck and crumpling it in my fist. "No," I admitted, "they won't stop until someone makes them." She turned to me, her lip trembling, frustration breaking through her calm mask. "Then why don't you? You could end this today. Just tell them who you are, tell them what you own. Why are you waiting?" Her words pierced deeper than she knew, because I wanted to tell her. I wanted to stand on the front lawn, shout the truth into every window, rip the masks off those men and watch them crumble under the weight of their lies. But I also knew something she didn't. Power revealed too soon loses its strength. "Because sometimes," I said carefully, "the best way to win a battle is to let your enemy believe they're winning first." She shook her head, turning away. "Feels like we're the ones losing." Her words stung because they weren't wrong. Every fake notice was another scar. Every whisper was another wound. And each day that passed, I could feel her spirit dimming a little more. By that evening, the guards returned. Not just 2 this time. 4. Their cheap uniforms looked stiffer now, as if they'd upgraded their performance with new props. One carried a clipboard, another wore mirrored sunglasses, even though the sun was already sinking. They marched down the street like they owned it, stopping at houses, knocking on doors, handing out leaflets. I didn't need to see the papers to know what they said: propaganda. Lies dressed up as rules. I stepped onto the porch, my daughter hovering just behind me. The tallest one noticed and smirked. "Evening, sir, we're doing community rounds." "Community rounds?" I echoed. "Is that what you call harassment these days?" The man chuckled. "Harassment? No, just keeping order." He tapped the clipboard. You've got quite a list of violations stacking up. If this continues, there will be consequences. I stepped down one stair, my voice calm but sharp. The only consequence coming is yours. The guard tilted his head, feigning amusement. Big words, careful, people might start thinking you're above the rules. I leaned closer, my eyes locked on his. I don't think I'm above them, I am them. For a moment, something flickered in his expression, doubt, unease, before he smothered it with a smirk. We'll see about that. The others handed out more leaflets as neighbors peeked from curtains, eager for their evening entertainment. My daughter's fingers gripped the edge of the doorframe, her knuckles white. She wanted me to stop them, to end it now, but not yet, not here. When they finally moved on, I picked one of the leaflets off the ground. The bold letters screamed, "Join the HOA Enforcement Initiative." Beneath it, promises of community safety, rule compliance, and neighborhood unity. All lies, all bait to recruit more believers into their little empire. I crumpled the paper. My daughter looked at me, her eyes fierce for the first time in days. They're building an army. She wasn't wrong. And that's when I realized this wasn't just about stopping them anymore. This was about dismantling them completely. That night I sat at the dining table long after my daughter had gone to bed. Deeds, records, contracts spread out before me like weapons. Every street, every lot, every home, all traced back to me. Proof that their entire charade was built on land they had no claim to. But as I stared at the papers, I thought about my daughter's tears, her trembling hands, her question. Why didn't anyone help me? And the answer gnawed at me, because maybe it wasn't just the guards, maybe it was the neighbors too. Their silence had allowed this to happen. Their whispers had given it oxygen. Which meant exposing the guards wasn't enough. I had to show the neighbors too. Show them the difference between false authority and true ownership, between fear and power. A soft creak pulled me from my thoughts. My daughter stood in the doorway, rubbing her eyes. You're still up. I smiled faintly, just planning. She shuffled closer, glancing at the papers. Are you going to fight them? I reached for her hand, squeezing it gently. No, sweetheart, I'm going to end them. She stared at me, searching my face, and finally whispered, just promise me one thing. Don't let them take away who you are. Her words settled heavy on my chest, because she didn't just mean my reputation. She meant my dignity, my humanity, the part of me that was still her father, not just some man with deeds and contracts. I promise, I said softly. She nodded, satisfied enough, and padded back to bed. But I stayed awake, the papers glowing under the lamp like a quiet arsenal. Because the guards thought they were building an army. But they'd forgotten the oldest truth about power. You don't need an army when you already own the battlefield. And soon, they would remember who the battlefield belonged to. The first punishment came 2 days later. A family down the block, the Harpers, woke up to find their driveway blocked by bright orange cones and a laminated sign. Parking privileges revoked. The mother stood on her porch, yelling at the guards, demanding answers. But they just shrugged, pointing at their clipboard like it was a badge from heaven. Her husband tried to move the cones, and they threatened to tow his car. Neighbors gathered, whispering. Some shook their heads in pity. Others smirked, glad it wasn't them. That's how fear spreads, not through violence, but through silence. My daughter stood beside me, her arms crossed tight, her voice bitter. They're winning. I shook my head. No, they're desperate. Desperation always comes before the fall. But she didn't look convinced, and I couldn't blame her. Because from her window, from her heart, all she saw was injustice piling higher and her father still standing still. By the next week, more punishments appeared. Trash bins tagged with fake fines, notices threatening liens. One man even found a chain across his front porch, a paper taped to it, unsafe area, entry prohibited. The guards strutted through the neighborhood like roosters in cheap uniforms, barking orders, collecting fees, enjoying the show. And people paid. They paid not because they believed, but because they were afraid. And my daughter, she cracked. One evening, after another neighbor whispered, "There goes the troublemaker's kid." As she walked home, she stormed inside, slammed the door, and collapsed on the couch, shaking. "I can't do this anymore," she shouted. Tears blurred her eyes. "Everywhere I go, they look at me like I'm the reason this is happening, like I'm the one who caused it." I tried to reach for her, but she pulled away, her words spilling faster. "They don't care about the truth. They don't care about us. And you just sit there with your papers and your plans while they destroy everything." Her voice cracked into a sob. "Why don't you fight back, Dad? Why won't you just end this?" Her pain cut me deeper than any insult, deeper than any notice. Because she didn't see what I was building. She couldn't feel the patience I was sharpening into a weapon. She only felt the weight of every whisper, every stare, every fake rule pinning her down. I pulled her into my arms, even as she tried to resist. "Sweetheart, listen to me. The fight isn't about shouting louder than them. It's about waiting until they shout themselves hoarse. And then, when they're weakest, we strike." She buried her face in my chest, sobbing. "But what if they break me before that?" That was the question I feared most, because patience is a strategy. But for her, every day wasn't strategy, it was survival. That night, after she cried herself to sleep, I stood in the dark, staring out at the street. The guard's cheap patrol car idled near the corner, its flashing light bar casting red across the pavement like a warning. They thought they owned the night. They thought fear was permanent. And I decided, enough waiting. The next morning, while the guards made their rounds, I made mine. Not with notices or threats, but with phone calls. Quiet, precise calls to lawyers, to officials, to people whose names never appeared in neighborhood gossip, but whose pens could erase entire illusions. I didn't announce it. I didn't tell my daughter, not yet, because power works best when it's invisible until the moment it is. Later that day, I caught sight of the guards tapping another violation to a mailbox. This time, the homeowner didn't resist. He just ripped the paper down, his face tight, his voice low as he muttered, "It's not worth the fight." That's when I walked over, calm, slow, deliberate. "Don't pay them," I said simply. The man looked up startled. "What?" "Don't pay them, don't acknowledge them, don't give them the satisfaction of your fear." He frowned, glancing nervously at the guards who were already watching us. "Easy for you to say, you're not the one they're targeting." I held his gaze. "They're targeting all of us, but what happens when they run out of people willing to play their game?" The man hesitated, then slowly nodded. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying," I answered, my voice low, "their rules don't exist. Their power doesn't exist. It's smoke. But smoke only lingers when people keep blowing on it." The man's eyes searched mine, and I could see it, the first spark of doubt against the guards. Not full trust. Not yet, but doubt is a crack, and cracks always spread. That night, my daughter asked me again if I was doing anything. I kissed her forehead and told her to trust me. She sighed. "You always say that." I looked into her tired eyes, and I knew words weren't enough anymore. Soon I'd have to show her. Soon I'd have to show everyone. Because the guards thought they were building an empire. But what they didn't see was that their empire had no foundation. And I was already pulling out the ground beneath them. The first act of defiance didn't go unanswered. 2 days after I told the neighbor not to pay, the Harper's house was hit again. This time, the guards chained their front gate shut and taped a red sign to it. "Property seized, HOA authority." It was a lie, of course, a ridiculous, laughable lie. But when fear takes root, even the most absurd threats bloom into nightmares. The Harpers tried to fight back at first, shouting, ripping the sign down. But by evening, their cars were gone from the driveway. By morning, their blinds were closed. They stopped answering the door. The message was clear. One neighbor's courage had been enough to make the guards bleed. But one punishment was enough to scare the rest into silence again. My daughter stood at the window, watching the guards drag another chain across another yard. Her voice was quiet but heavy. "They're winning, Dad. No one's going to stand up to them. No one." I walked to her side, my jaw tight. "Not no one." She turned to me, her eyes red from nights of restless sleep. "Then when? When are you going to stop letting them do this?" Her words pierced, not because they were wrong, but because they carried the weight of disappointment. She wanted to believe in me, but belief is fragile. Every day I waited was another crack in her faith. That evening, I sat on the porch as the guards made their rounds, their fake patrol car crawling down the street. Neighbors peeked through curtains, watching the show, waiting for the next victim. And that's when I stood up. The tallest guard spotted me and smirked. "Evening, got another violation notice for you." He slapped a bright orange paper onto my gate. I didn't look at it, didn't touch it. Instead, I stepped down the path, slow and steady, until I was standing in the middle of the street, right in front of their car. Engines hummed, lights flashed red and blue against the houses, but I didn't move. "Sir," the driver barked, "step aside." I didn't. The guards climbed out, puffing their chests, trying to turn the crowd of neighbors into their stage again. But this time, I gave them no room for performance. I held up my hand, and with my other I pulled out a single folder. "This," I said, my voice low but carrying, "is the deed to this street. This very one you're standing on. Signed, sealed, filed with the county, which means every second you've been here, every step you've taken, every chain you've dragged, you've been trespassing." The guards froze, the neighbors gasped. My daughter, peeking from the porch, covered her mouth. I flipped the folder open, holding the paper high enough for the nearest pair of eyes to catch. "You talk about rules, about order, about authority. You have none, you never did. All you've done is abuse fear, and I am done letting you do it." For a heartbeat, silence blanketed the street. And then, like the snapping of a brittle branch, the shorter guard scoffed. "Nice story," he sneered. "You think a piece of paper scares us?" I stepped closer, my voice sharp as glass. "It's not the paper that should scare you. It's the law behind it. It's the ownership. It's the fact that every inch you thought was yours is mine. And the only reason you're still standing here is because I've chosen patience over punishment." The taller guard's smirk faltered, but he tried to cover it. Empty threats. I leaned in, my words for him alone, though everyone heard them. "No, a warning, and the last one you'll get." The neighbors whispered louder now. Some looked at me with new eyes, others at the guards with doubt. Cracks were spreading again, wider, deeper this time. But my daughter, she wasn't smiling. She wasn't cheering. She just stared, her expression unreadable, her hands gripping the railing as if she wasn't sure whether to be relieved or more afraid. The guards finally backed toward their car, tossing one last notice onto the street as they left. But their swagger was thinner now, their bluster weaker. The crowd dispersed, murmuring, buzzing. Some avoided my eyes, some nodded just barely. But one thing was certain, the guards weren't invincible anymore. When I walked back inside, my daughter met me at the door. "You showed them," she whispered. I nodded, a piece just enough. Her brow furrowed. "But what if it's not enough? What if they come back stronger?" I placed a hand on her shoulder. "Then we'll be stronger too." She didn't answer, but I could see the flicker in her eyes, the faint return of hope, fragile as a candle in the wind. That night, as I sat alone with the folder still open on the table, I thought about what came next. Because one reveal wasn't enough. The guards would lick their wounds, sharpen their lies, and return with new tactics. But now, the neighbors had seen the first crack in their armor, and sometimes that's all it takes. The daughter's faith was wounded but not broken. The neighbor's silence was bending. The guard's illusion was fatting. The battle wasn't over, but for the first time I felt the tide beginning to turn. And soon the wave would break. They didn't stay quiet for long. 2 nights later I woke to the sound of engines. Headlights flashed across the walls, brighter than, when I stepped outside I saw them, not 2 guards, not 4. 6. 2 cars parked crooked in the road, their hazard lights pulsing like warnings. And this time they weren't just tapping notices, they were pounding on doors. One by one, houses lit up as neighbors shuffled to their porches in robes and slippers. The guards barked orders, waving clipboards, thrusting papers into people's hands. Unpaid fines, non-compliance, final warnings. The neighbors' faces blurred between fear and exhaustion. Some argued, some begged, but most just nodded, taking the papers like guilty children even though they'd done nothing wrong. It wasn't about violations anymore. It was about domination. I stood at the end of my driveway, watching. My daughter came out behind me, her arms wrapped tight around her chest, her face pale in the glow of flashing lights. "Dad," she whispered, "they're not going to stop until everyone breaks." I looked at her, my girl, strong and stubborn, now trembling like the child she used to be. And for the first time, I saw her hope flicker, almost snuffed out. That night, she didn't sleep. I heard her packing in her room, heard her muffled sobs, and when I opened the door, I found her curled on the floor, her phone in her hands. On the screen was a message thread. Dozens of texts, all unanswered, friends from school, neighbors' kids, people she thought were hers, but the messages were all the same: silence, blocked, ignored. She looked up at me with eyes that had lost their light. "I don't have anyone left. They all think I'm the reason for this." My chest ached. I knelt beside her, pulling her into my arms. "You still have me." Her voice cracked like glass. "But what if that's not enough?" Those words, they shattered me, because I had always believed being her father meant being enough. That no matter the storm, no matter the weight, my love would shield her. And now she was telling me it was. And maybe she was right. That's when I knew the waiting was over. The next morning, I didn't hide my calls. I didn't whisper my plans in the dark. I started moving openly. Papers, emails, meetings. My daughter watched, confused at first, then curious. "What are you doing?" she asked. I closed a folder and looked at her with steady eyes. "Ending it." Her brows knit. "How?" I gave a small smile. "By reminding them and everyone else who this place really belongs to." That evening the guards returned, strutting through the neighborhood again. But this time, when they reached our house, I was waiting. Not with anger, not with fists, with proof. I stepped into the street, folder in hand, just like before. But this time, I didn't stop with one deed. I opened the folder and pulled out a stack so thick it bent under its own weight. "Every lot, every parcel, every home," I announced, my voice carrying into the gathering crowd. "You've been trespassing on all of it." The neighbors leaned closer, whispering, straining to see. The guards tried to laugh it off, but their eyes darted nervously. I held up one paper. "Lot 17, signed to me 10 years ago." Another. "Lot 23, paid in full." Another. "Lot 12, Lot 9, Lot 5, mine." Gasps rippled through the crowd. "Every chain you've dragged, every notice you've taped, every lie you've sold, it was all on ground that belongs to me." The tallest guard sneered, but his voice cracked. "Nobody cares about your paperwork. We run this neighborhood now." I took a step closer, lowering my voice just enough to slice through the air. "Then explain to the sheriff why you're running it without jurisdiction. Explain to the county why you've been extorting families on property you don't own. Explain to a judge why your names are on these notices." The guards froze. The neighbors' murmurs swelled into something sharper now: outrage, suspicion, courage. But the battle wasn't finished. Not yet. Because fear doesn't vanish in a single night. It lingers, claws digging deep. And though the neighbors now doubted the guards, they still hesitated to act. And my daughter, she stood at the edge of the porch, her face unreadable. She had seen the papers. She had heard my words, but hope is fragile. One speech doesn't mend a broken spirit. Later, when the guards retreated in their cars, she came to me quietly. "What if they don't leave? What if they just keep coming back?" I placed my hands on her shoulders. "Then next time, I won't just show them papers, I'll show them power." Her eyes searched mine, and for the first time in weeks I saw it, a flicker. A spark of belief, not whole, not healed, but returning. That night, as the neighborhood settled back into uneasy silence, I sat by the window again. The streets I owned lay stretched before me, cloaked in shadows, waiting. The guards thought they were predators, but predators forget. Even the strongest hunter starves when the ground itself turns against him. And I was about to turn the ground beneath their feet into fire. It all came to a head on a Friday night. The guards returned in force, louder and bolder than ever, their cars blocking both ends of the street. This time they weren't here to issue notices or tape signs. They were here to crush resistance. Floodlights spilled across the homes, drowning the neighborhood in harsh white glare. The guards marched up driveways in pairs, banging on doors, shouting fines, demanding payments in cash. They thought fear had marinated long enough to taste like obedience. But they didn't realize the silence they heard wasn't submission anymore. It was waiting. I stepped out of my house with my daughter beside me. She was nervous, her hand gripping mine, but she didn't hide this time. She wanted to see it, the end. "Stay close," I told her, though my eyes never left the guards. The tallest one saw me and smirked. "There he is, the paperwork king, ready to be evicted from your own castle." Laughter echoed from his crew, but there was a hollowness to it now, a tremor. They'd seen the neighbors whisper, they'd seen doubt spreading, and nothing eats an empire faster than doubt. I didn't waste words. I pulled out my phone, pressed a single button, and raised it high. From the end of the street, engines rumbled. Not cheap cars this time, official ones. Sheriff's cruisers, their sirens silent but their lights flashing red and blue. The guards stiffened. The neighbors poured from their homes, filling the sidewalks, the lawns, the porches. No one hid behind blinds anymore. The sheriff's deputies climbed out, firm and unhurried. One of them looked at me, then at the folder in my hand, and gave the smallest nod. I turned to the guards, my voice calm, almost gentle. "You pretended to be authority, you lied, you stole. You tried to turn fear into power, but the truth is simple, you never had authority, not 1 ounce of it." The sheriff stepped forward, his badge gleaming in the floodlights. "These men are under investigation for fraud, impersonation, and extortion. Step aside." Panic flickered across their faces. The tallest guard tried to bluster, waving his arms. "This is a mistake. We're the HOA, we have rights." But the sheriff cut him off cold. "You're nothing. Drop the clipboards, hands where I can see them." Neighbors gasped as the guards were surrounded, their protests collapsing into stammers. Some resisted only to be shoved against cars, their wrists snapped into cuffs. Their bravado drained away until all that remained was the truth. They were bullies stripped bare. The crowd erupted, not with cheers but with something heavier, release. Mothers cried into their husbands' shoulders. Fathers held their kids close. The tension that had gripped every porch, every window, every heart finally cracked. I felt my daughter squeeze my hand, and when I looked at her, tears traced her cheeks. But her eyes shone. "They're gone," she whispered, like she almost couldn't believe it. I nodded, "They're gone." But it wasn't just their defeat that mattered. It was what came next. The sheriff handed me the stack of confiscated notices, his expression grim. "These will be evidence now, but I'll need your help testifying." I gave a single nod. "You'll have it." And when I turned, I saw the neighbors looking at me, really looking at me. Not with suspicion, not with fear, with gratitude, with respect. One by one, they stepped closer. A nod from Mr. Harper. A quiet thank you from the elderly woman who'd cried on her porch weeks ago. Even the kids, hiding behind their parents, peeked out with something new in their eyes. For the first time, the neighborhood wasn't divided by fear. It was united by truth. Later that night, after the cruisers had driven away with the guards inside, my daughter and I sat on the porch. The street was quiet again, not the smothering quiet of dread, but the soft kind, the kind that belongs to peace. She leaned her head on my shoulder. "I thought I lost everyone," she whispered, "even you." I wrapped an arm around her. "You never lost me, and you never will." Her breath trembled, but then she smiled, a small, real smile, the kind I hadn't seen in weeks. "I believe you now." We sat there in silence, watching the stars reappear in the sky above the roofs we owned, above the street we'd fought to protect. And in that silence, I realized something. The fight hadn't just been about property, or deeds, or even law. It had been about dignity, about standing when standing meant being alone, about showing my daughter that fear doesn't have to be the end of the story. Because sometimes, the strongest thing you can own isn't land or paper or power. It's the faith of the people you love. It's the belief that no matter how dark the night, the dawn will always come. And as my daughter's laughter finally returned, soft but alive, I knew the truth. We hadn't just beaten the guards. We had reclaimed our home. Forever.